So this video today is just to talk to you about the skins I use on my drums, basically, because I think they're quite important to the sound that I get. So I'm going to talk about these skins, I'm going to talk about why I use them, I'm going to talk about how I tune them, which is kind of similar to, or just how I go about tuning, I guess, which you can also apply to plastic heads. And then I'm also going to talk about give you some tips if you do want to try using some calf heads. Then some kind of tips that I've learned over the last few years of using them that might help you. So this is a 1957 WFL kit. So it's a 26, 13, 16, 18, and a 14 by 5.5. And I've got this. This is all calf heads on this on the top, not on the bottom, because it just helps with some of the tuning. But on the top is all calf. And I've had this. These are heads are made by a company called Magitone Industries, who unfortunately aren't going anymore. But you can get hold of calf, and there's some people lapping calf you can find online, or there's like Earth Tone, a big company, or there's the kangaroo heads if you want to import them. But why I did it is because I'm always trying to recreate and get in the headspace of my favourite drummers from the past, and they obviously played on calfskin heads, so but it makes sense once I got them. Like it made so much sense for the sound that they get and the way they play, because the drums are so big, and the way they feel that the calf doesn't bounce quite the same as plastic heads, so it makes you play a certain way. But and I wasn't sure whether to do it, because you hear all these nightmares or from people saying, oh, the heads break all the time, and they fluctuate so much in temperature. And I wasn't sure, but they're expensive, as well. I think I paid 500 odd quid, I think, to get for this kit to be all kitted out in calf, and it's not cheap. But the deciding factor for me was I had another kit in calf, and in fact most of my other kits, I've only got a couple that aren't, and mostly play calf now. But when the big game changer was when I did it and playing Sing Sing Sing, that floor tom pattern rattle on there. Like it was just that was a eureka moment for me, because it sounds so good. Like playing that on even using an old drum but on a synthetic head, like it's 90% of the sound, but doesn't quite have the fullness and the warmth. That's what G Cooper was playing. So it's this style drum, it's that style skin, and it's these style sticks, everything, these things. So for me, I was like, right, I want to get into the mindset of these guys. The calf skin is the way forward to do it. How I tune these heads, basically, it's essentially the same as you do with the synthetic heads. But so I'll tell you how I go about it. It's probably how most of you do. But if you're changing your head, take the head off, take the hoop off, and then I'll put the head back on, put the hoop back on, and I'll just put all the tension rods in opposite each other, obviously, so we put the head on evenly and as finger tight as I can. So I do them up just tight as I can using my fingers. Then use a key, and I actually go around in increments. So I might do a 90-degree turn or a 180-degree turn, obviously opposites again, all the way around, and see how that sounds. Then I go around with one, so I hold the middle to dampen it a bit. Then I go around next to each lug, about the same distance away from each one, and I can actually hear which of the lugs are slightly down tuned and need to be even, so when I hear which one is different, I tend to then correct them so they're about the same tension all the way around, and then I see if I actually like the tone that I've got from that skin. Then they tend to have an area, with the size of the drum and the size of the skin, there is a sweet spot in your tunings, I find, and then I do it against my other skins and see what it sounds like. Now I don't tune. Some people tune in pitches, and I don't do that. I did go through a period doing that, but like if you're recording, if you're doing pop stuff, it's nice to tune to the key of the song. It's just a little subtle thing, but it does help the drums and the fills fit in. But you have to retune every song with a different key. I don't do pop style recording really, or very little of it. And when using calf, the pitches do change and fluctuate in the gig, so they don't stay in those pitches anyway. So I just do kind of notes I like. I don't particularly choose what notes in the scale they are, and I'll I might not take all 3 drums, so I want them to all work with each other without the rest. But the other tip I do then, so if I've got the tone that I don't really like, I move the whole drum up or down a bit, so all the lugs even amount. I try and get as close as I can each tension rod to be roughly the same angle of the key. It's a bit OCD, but it helps me. So I know if it's at 90 degrees with the if it's the same angle as the hoop, then this one should be as well. And if I move that up, do a 45-degree extra turn, and I've both of them 45, all the way around. And I do that because when I have to, they do move on gigs. Now it's not horrific like these stories I heard of they're fluctuating so much it's a problem. Most of mine aren't. Every now and then you do a couple of gigs that are really hot or really sweaty, and they do move, and I'm having to retune maybe 2 or 3 times at the most in a set. But you just get used to doing it. So you can do it between songs while someone's talking. I managed to get 1 drum then, focus on the snare drum. Then I'll go around and do the rest. But it doesn't happen that often. Nowadays, the temperatures don't fluctuate so much. We haven't got, if you think about the American guys, they're dealing with less air conditioning and the really hot lights. Nowadays, temperature doesn't fluctuate that much. So they do move, but it's not too noticeable. And for me, I quite like tuning. I'm always quite aware of it, and it keeps my ear in, hearing what tone I'm actually getting from the drums. The other thing that I was worried about when I changed was I wasn't sure about getting the bass drum done, because it's the biggest skin, so it's the most expensive one to buy, and I wasn't sure if the tone would be that noticeable. I'm not really sure why. It's kind of obvious it would be, but just because you're playing it with a beater instead of a stick, I wasn't sure if it would be as noticeable. But probably think it's more because it's a softer, rounder. I use a soft beater on this, so it's like a big warm sound. And I did it, and again, I'm really glad I did, because it's that right kind of big boomy sound that I like, but it's really warm and it doesn't actually move. I was worried about putting it on because tweaking the bass drum between songs is harder work than tweaking the other drums. You can't, you got to bend down to get to it all. But it doesn't. It moves the least. I think because the skin's the biggest, the change in temperature are the least noticeable. It can absorb more water or have more water evaporated from it. So that's been fine for me. It's the snare drum and the floor toms, the rest of the toms that I have to keep in control of, and that's the reason I haven't got calf on the bottom. It's a certain sound. I've got a couple of snare drums that have calf on the bottom, and they're great. They give more of a drum sound than a snare sound, which I like playing certain eras. But just because it's enough, sometimes it's enough to keep the top heads in. I didn't want to have to deal with keeping the bottom heads tuned as well. So that's how I tune them, really, to get them up and down, check that middle, and then I make sure, and that's why I make sure that I know if I've tuned a 90 or a 45 round or something, because when I'm tuning between songs, I know I've done them all the same, all the drum keys at the same angle on each drum. Sometimes you do that and you still don't, when I've gone round and they're not even, I have to tweak them again and it's somewhere between a 90 and a 45, but I have to adjust it. Or sometimes I don't like the actual tone that I've got from the tuning I've got, so I have to adjust a couple to a different. I might take them down a 45 or a 90, so they're different, but then the whole head I like the sound of and it's balanced. So that's how I tune it, which is basically the same as you would with a synthetic head. So finally, some tips for if you're gonna try some calf, which I think you should. If you can afford it and you like old jazz and you like old stuff, I would try getting some calf heads, because I really like the sound of it. And so if you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of these other drummers and the things they're dealt with, I think it's a great thing to do. And you get the warmth and the tone of the drums of the era that I really like. But things to think about is if you're a hard hitter, they're not. I wouldn't advise them, because I've never gone through a head. It's again, everyone, when I was looking at doing it, everyone was like, oh, you're going to break them all the time, but like they're paper or something. But they're not. You just have to look after them a certain way, and you don't smash them really hard. But sometimes I feel like I'm playing pretty hard, and I never go through them. But when I do rock and roll gigs or gigs outside, I tend to try and I don't really use them. I use synthetic heads just because more the cost of replacing them. If I did go through, they're expensive. When the guys were using them in the 50s, the pros, people would pay for their replacement heads. It didn't matter if they broke them. So that's yeah, so I'd try them, but if you're going to be if you're a heavy hitter, maybe not. There's also the thing about the temperature of them, so they can't get wet, so you've got to look after, or you've got to dry them out if you can. So like, and you've got to look after your tuning more in the gigs. There's a thing that 2 ways looking that I was told about when I was looking at them as well. Some guys that I know use calf and girls, they tune them, if they have them tuned quite high, they tune them down at the end of the gig. Now I do have all my drums quite low. It's just the sound I like, and generally the drummers I like think have their drums tuned on the lower side, probably because the drums are really big as well. You know, the bop guys have them tuned a bit higher, and I don't really do that. So there's there's 2 ways of thinking about it really, because you tune your drums up for the gig, and then you tune them down the calf and put them in the cases, and then if you're out in America or whatever, like it's hot in the van and then the venue's air conditioned, so the skin is fluctuating all the time, so you tune it down so it's got the space to go up and down. But I don't do that. I think because I keep them lower, it's not so much of an issue. The temperature doesn't fluctuate so much in the UK, and because I don't tune them up and down wildly, like the skin's only moving a little bit in temperature, it's not having to move loads. So I think, I'm not sure which one's better, but I've never had a head break in the van, and I don't tune them down, just leave them where they are. The other thing I was going to mention is that the alternatives. So if you want a kind of calf sound, but necessarily want the calf, I've tried the fibre skins, skin tones, and the vintage A's, the Remo vintage A's, and the A's are my favourite actually. They are the closest as what I use on my other kits. I think they're the closest sound to calf compared to the other two, but they look very modern. Is a problem with them because they're coated and they look like other skins, which shouldn't matter. It's not about aesthetics, it's about the sound, isn't it? But the skin tones and fibre skins, I like the way they look, but for me they both separated like over time when I was playing them. The tone wasn't as warm as I wanted, and the mesh heads that they started to separate overuse, especially in the rock and roll band. So I do a lot of floor tom stuff. The singer likes it when you play on the floor tom and snare drum grooves, and just started to separate from them. Maybe I swipe across on the drum quite a lot, but it was separating them. So try them out or look at other calf ones as well, and see what you think. But that's my opinion on why I use calf and some tips on it and how I tune them. So hopefully that's helpful, and see you again soon.